We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. I am here with Joe. He will be coming back on. He was here. I think he just went off for a bit. Something may have happened, so hopefully he'll come back on and we can get started. But yeah, today we're going to talk to him just about Indigenous people and the relationship with America. And of course, he can't speak for everybody in the whole, in every tribe, but he's going to speak to what he knows. So we're going to give him a second to come back on. He was just here, so I think something may have taken place with his video maybe. So I'm going to give him a second and come back on. I hope everybody is doing well today. I am great. Oh, there he is. I was going to do small talk and talk to you guys, but he is back. So we'll bring him on. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Hey, Buju, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Buju, Nadijnika, Spanish, Wababiji, Dodum, Gunjaba, Washington, Gunjaba, Badawin, Gunjaba, Grand Rapids, Gunjaba, Colorado. Ojibwe, Cherokee, member of the Sioux Indian. I'm Martin clan, which is the warrior clan, and I am a member of the tribe of Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, and I'm Ojibwe, and I'm from Grand Rapids.
Joe, you are breaking up just a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on here. Joe, can you hear me?
Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan.
Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
You're breaking up. You're going in and out just a little bit. So a lot of that we did not hear.
Oh, did you? Oh, when I translate?
Yeah, I think your connection is going in and out just a bit.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. So I said, hello, my name is Banishi. I am from the Martin clan, which is the warrior clan, and I'm a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, and I'm Ojibwe, and I'm from Grand Rapids, Colorado Springs, and Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Joe. I appreciate you for taking the time today to be here. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation because, it's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths that go around in regards to Indigenous people, in regards to Native Americans. A lot of times people say, oh, the natives already got all their reparations. They got all this wonderful land. They get all this free money. They can go to school for free. So all these things are said, so people are like, well, what are they mad about? You know what I mean? Because all these different things are being said. I know for myself, I was always told that, but I myself have gone to different reservations that look nothing like the picture that was painted. So I wanted you to come on to talk about it because, like I told you, I had a young lady from the Navajo Nation that was on a month or so ago, and she talks about it a little bit. It was a little bit of a connection issue. So a lot of the information was not able to get out. So I wanted to have her back on too at one point in time to talk about it. So you're here. So I want to just talk about America and her relationships, because some of her relationships with different people, especially people that are non-white, have been a little bit conflicted, to say the least. So I want you to kind of, get started and we can talk about, some of the myths of reparations and how that's not necessarily true in regards to how it's taught in school and just by word of mouth. So.
Yeah, so it's probably important to start with that prior to assimilation, and I call them the illegal immigrants coming from Europe. There are over 570 nations in this continent called North and South America, and we didn't have borders. Our people migrated during different seasons for different reasons, and so when assimilation and colonization happened, it totally took away our lifestyle, and we had to learn to adapt. Um, because of that, there were many treaties that were signed with federal government and then later states, and not one of those treaties have been honored by
Okay.
the United States or the states in the history of this country, and that's a fact. It's not debatable. It's not arguable. All you have to do is do your research. And so when people say these free things, uh, one, they're showing their true ignorance of history, and two, they're showing their true ignorance of their own language, the English language,
Okay.
because a treaty is an agreement that was made between two parties, correct? So if I made a transaction with you and we agreed to these terms and we entered that and we signed that, that's a contract. And that's what
Hmm.
a treaty is. And due to the Constitution, that is what rules this land, treaties are the
Hmm.
supreme law of the land. So when we say free, that comes with a certain racial bias, I like to call it, because
Okay.
nothing that we got was free. We gave up over, I want to say, probably over 4/5 of this continent, right? For the little bit of things that we did get. And it's also important for people to know that in the state of Michigan, all the 13 tribes that are federally recognized that did get gaming rights, so they have like casinos or resorts or things like that, that in the year 2017 is the last stats that I have.
Okay.
$64 million were paid by those nations to the state of Michigan for the general fund. So when we say free, again, that's just what we paid to the, and a lot of these agreements where these gaming laws and things were written. Uh, so my tribe, for instance, we pretty much fund the city of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. Without my
Okay.
reservation and that casino there, that city wouldn't have a new jail. They wouldn't have the updated city hall. They wouldn't have any of that. And that happens in all these communities where these native communities reside, whether it be Bay Mills, Kiwana Bay. Let's look at Battle Creek.
Okay.
What about Saginaw? All
Hmm.
those things, all local governments are funded by those tribal nations. So when we say free, again, that's a subjective term, and it just shows that people don't understand how treaties work. Or
Right.
I always find it funny because these are the same people that cite law and order and contract law and the Constitution. Well, it says right in your Constitution that treaties are the supreme law of the land, and you haven't honored not one of them. So we haven't gotten anything for free. These were things my ancestors died and fought for.
Right. Okay.
And so one of the free things that people think that we get is this profit sharing. So
Hmm.
again, there were 13 tribes that are federally recognized in the state. Only 5 give profit sharing, and that's important to understand. My tribe is not one of them. The largest tribe east of the Mississippi. Um, I'm sorry, west of the Mississippi. We're the largest
Okay.
tribe. Now, when the gaming laws came in and all this revenue started coming into the communities, um, there are certain requirements that each tribal nation gets to instill on who becomes a member. That's called tribal sovereignty. So if
Okay.
one tribe wants to require that in order to be a member of that tribe, one must be half quantum or a quarter quantum, that's their tribal sovereignty and that's their right to do so. However, the treaties, every treaty that was ever signed and written says every Indian, and it never mentions quantum. It says every Indian, not every member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, every member of the Gun Lake Machibishi or every member of the Comanche tribe, et cetera, et cetera. It says every Indian. And there's no mention of quantums. Quantums is just another form of colonization that has trickled into our tribal sovereignty. So it's just
Okay.
another layer that we have to navigate through in order to get these free things. The only free thing that we get as indigenous people in the state of Michigami, which is Michigan, is the Michigan Indian Tuition Waiver. And in order to do that is an obstacle course, to say the least. And as you know, as a person of color, not all our people are as determined and goal oriented as some of us, to make sure that, hey, if you're going to give me that carrot, I'm going to do everything I can to get that carrot to show people that it can be done, right?
Right.
Not everybody has that self-determination. However, those of us that do, feel it's our job to advocate for those that can. So to the MITW, it used to be prior to the 2000 change that we would send a copy of our application to a university or college to our tribal office. Our tribal office would then verify that we were a member and that we met the state requirement of being a quarter blood, because, hey, they don't want to educate a bunch of Indians, right? Because they fear an educated Indian. That's a fact. Just like they fear Black educated people. That's a fact. Because when people are educated, people of color, and they know the history and they know how systems operate, they don't want us out here educating people on how to attack them and how to break them down. That will go against their system.
And I think that, just to interrupt real quick, I think that goes back to, especially for Black people, when you go back to slavery, where it was forbidden to learn how to read, it was forbidden to learn how to write. So people had to do it in secret. And it was this fear of, if I understand things, then I can't question. I can be, a bit combative and stir some things up. So there is a fear there, especially I know at that time, and I believe still to this day, there are some fears in regards to people kind of rising up and joining up together. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so that's going to lead us into later about generational trauma, right? And how we carry that.
Yes.
So the MITW is, so when that change became, so I have an Indian card and it says that I'm an Indian and that I'm a member of this tribe. And I'm going to tell you right now, the only goddamn thing that Indian card ever got me was a hard time.
Okay.
That being said, we used to just send a copy of our intent to enroll to our tribal office. They would verify our membership, and then they would contact the school and be like, yep, he's a member and they qualify. Well, now what we do is, it's so redundant and dumb, I don't get it. We send a copy of this application along with a copy of our Indian card to our tribal office, who verifies that we're a member. So I don't know what validation our Indian card has or why the hell we carry it. And then they send it to the Civil Rights Department of Michigan, and then Michigan will notify the school. So that's just another layer and an obstacle that people are putting in front of our people, right, in order to get these free things.
Do you think
and the fact of the matter,
I'm sorry. Do you think they do that to discourage people to just kind of wear you out? I think I look at that, like, even with like insurance claims or different, it's all these loopholes, right, that they put place to get you discouraged, where you just say, forget it. I just don't want it anymore. I'll just do whatever and won't get the free stuff, right?
Absolutely. So I had that experience. I tried to enroll for I don't even remember. It was just like a class to occupy some time at GRCC, and the added layers that they had. I took their application, rolled it up, and I told them, I said, if my brothers had come here, hey, they wouldn't even have listened to you, because that would have just been too much. And there's other people in our community that are like that, because that's exactly why they put those things in place, so that they discourage you from utilizing those things that my ancestors fought for. We gave up tons of land for this and our freedom. And I'm going to take advantage of it. And I'm going to make sure that I make it easier for those behind me, that they get to utilize it as well.
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about the boarding schools. We've always, I just learned about them probably couple years ago, and I didn't really learn as much as I would wanted to because I was just amazed. I was in awe when I heard about it. There was a lady here that lives locally who is a historian, Jennifer Vanette, and she talks about it. And I looked it up and was just in awe that this happened. And it was just, I mean, just down the road from where we are. And so I want you to kind of talk about the boarding schools, why they were developed. I mean, I get why they were developed, but I want you to talk about it because we
Yeah.
understand why, boarding schools, just like redlining, just like projects were developed. There's reasons why, but I want you to talk about the boarding schools and how it impacted you personally.
Yep. Okay, so it's important to understand that the city of Mount Pleasant was a federal Indian training school at one time in the early 20s and late 20s. And then in 1933, the state acquired it in a deal with the federal government. And that's how that MITW program became law, was because of that deal.
Okay.
And so Mount Pleasant held some boarding schools. And then the state would take a rail and they would send kids that couldn't go to the one in Mount Pleasant, but maybe they were going to like Carlisle in Pennsylvania or whatever. So they would go to Detroit or Lansing. And that's why today those two areas are the most active areas for the Lanes, because the parents would come to see their kids off and would come there in hopes maybe that they were coming back for a Christmas visit or for a summer. This was a practice.
Explain.
Yeah, so there was documents.
Kind of how they started, like what the kind of sold to the people as a thing of hope, but really it was a lie.
Yeah, so it started here in Michigan with Father Barriga Marquette. So they would come in, and we call them black robes. And Barriga literally stole our language, had a book published in Europe that was then distributed to all the black robes, and they used it in assimilation as they came into Michigan. And there was federal government documents that state that they were taking Native kids to kill the Indian and save the man, that our people were savage, we were barbarian, we didn't know how to take care of our own, which total contradiction, because if you look at history prior to the Dawes Act, my people were communal people. That was just, and we still are today, right? We still practice those same concepts today, but the Dawes Act changed that. And it was a federally funded program that literally ripped children from homes. And how it affected me personally was my father, who's 3/4 blood, was given to my great-grandmother on Sugar Island because my grandparents feared that he was going to be taken and put into a boarding school. And that was a common practice here until 1986. That was the last time. And in Canada, I think the last one was like in 1993 or even maybe a little recently. And they're starting to have a reconciliation with the church as well about that. And it's had generational trauma. It's added a layer of that. And because of that, there's a quote I want to read from this book called An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And it's going to kind of lead to where I think you want to go with this conversation. And this is from a student that was at the school. They told us that Indians were bad. They said we must get civilized. I remember that word too. It means be like the white man. I'm willing to be like the white man, but I do not believe Indians' ways were wrong. But they kept teaching us for 7 years. And the books told how bad the Indians had been to the white men, burning their towns and killing their women and children. But I had seen white men do that to Indians. We all wore white man's clothes, and we ate white man's food. And we went to white man's churches and spoke white man's talk. And so after a while, we also began to say that Indians were bad. We laughed at our own people and their blankets and cooking pots and sacred societies and dances. That's effects of assimilation. And because of that, hey, we lost a lot of our ways and our traditions. But the boarding schools were purposely done to do that. Our people weren't allowed to speak our language, right? So when I did my greeting, Buju, Nadijne Kosh, Hello, I Am. They went to that. They got punished. Their hair got cut. They
Oh
weren't
wow.
allowed to do work. Everything when they showed up to that boarding school, they were stripped of all their nativeness, and it was burned in a fire. And they were punished if they utilized it, right? And up until 1952, there's documents that you could buy a native kid for $10.
Oh my
So
goodness. Oh my God.
it was this long ago. It really wasn't, right? Like
Right.
1952 wasn't that long ago. And my people still weren't free, and we were being sold. Our kids were being sold. And today, it's happening to our women, right? The murdered and missing Indigenous women, and they're not investigated. Nobody ever cares about hearing it. There's always a twist to the story, right? Well, they were a drug addict or whatever it was, right? Whatever they want to do to demean us, to make us look like those things that they tried to make us look like during the boarding school era. And that affects on this community here in Michigan today, because we haven't had a chance at reconciliation with the church. And until the church is willing to have that reconciliation, it's going to continue to divide our community and our families, and it's going to continue to backtrack us in our identity issue. And every reservation here in this state has a church on it, which is absolutely asinine to me. Can you imagine driving every day and being told these things that happen to your people, and you're driving every day on your way to work or whatever, and I have to drive by a church, right? The same people that did all this stuff to us.
Hmm.
I call that Stockholm syndrome,
It is,
right?
and a lot of people, and this is just a proven fact. And I wanted to mention that David wrote that they broke his father's hands because he would not write English. This is not a theory or something that people are making up. This is true, documented events that have taken place, and that's why it's very interesting to me when people argue it or say that just get over it. This stuff didn't happen like hundreds of years ago. This is
Right.
still very, very present and very current. And a lot of things. I mean, it boggles my mind when people don't want to just look at the truth. History books, stuff is written in it. Like you said, you have documentation that shows that this took place. And I just wanted to touch on the fact that I know with Black people, when people talk about slavery and being brought over here, and people would say that, we were savages, that we were so dumb and so uneducated. But we were brought to a place that we didn't understand the language. We had a totally different culture, totally different religion, and we were forced to assimilate. And so, of course, if I don't understand your language and you talk to me, if I can't speak back, to call dumb or slow or uneducated it just boggles my mind. So I don't even understand when people have that argument. There's no conversation because you're not even being logical, and just factual. So we have a lot of similarities in regards to being forced into assimilating to a certain culture, and people don't understand why some people have issue with it. Even still today, so
Yeah. And so there's actual documentation that first contact with my people and non-natives was the Black Muslim back in the 1400s, right?
mhm.
Or more, I believe.
More, yeah,
It wasn't
yep.
even a white man, right?
Mhm.
So that oppression, and I always tell people in the presentations that I give at schools that uh, the oppression and the things that my people face is very similar to that of the Black community. The only difference is that one, because our people were enslaved too, and then it's also important to realize, and I'm going to come back to that actually.
Sure.
The similarity of this is that most of my people can go back and trace our cultural roots, our lineage, right? Some of them can't because of boarding schools. That's how bad they really did those families, right? They just
Yeah.
can't. There's no proof. Your people, we literally took from a continent and made sure that they can't go back and get their cultural weights, because all people in this world are at one point tribal. All people were, even the white people. Hey, but the white people lost their ways, and that's why they became savage, right? They lost that tribal identity, and they forgot their ways. Um, and I think it's important to understand that, because when we as people of color start, well, our people were oppressed more, or we start making it the oppression Olympics, um, we're never going to have unity. And I can think of many times in history where our two people uh, came together and supported each other, and we made great change in this country, and we brought social justice to a lot, especially in the late 60s and early 70s, with the Black Panthers and AIM. They did a lot of things together to bring some change to this country, and we have to understand that, and we have to appreciate that everything's similar, but also similar means different, right? And we have to embrace that, and we have to meet people halfway where they're at. And I think that's where a lot of us fail, is that we fail to meet people where they're at. And I think that you and I in our earlier discussions had talked. So like me and Grandmaster Jay, hey, we're very passionate people, but we don't code switch. And when we don't code switch, hey, people get triggered real quick, right? Because I'm not conforming to what they think a civilized Indian should be, and I'll never will be that, because I'm not that.
Or sometimes just truth, like your truth. Like when you speak your truth, people get uncomfortable with that. People get offended by that, because there is something that, in my belief, that pricks them somewhere where they like, okay, wait a minute, I resonate. That resonated with me some kind of way. They don't like that it resonated, and then they act out. So, I too have, as I told you, have been, accused of being angry or aggressive if I speak very clearly and directly and look people in their eyes. So I understand that all the time. So it got to a point where, at old jobs, I would try to talk like this and a little slower, a little softer, so that I was not accused of being angry, when really this is just how I talk, and I'm secure in what I'm saying. I understood that people sometimes put their insecurities onto you. So I learned that's what was happening. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to be me. And this is just, you get what you get. So I understand that. I understand that quite well. So I want to talk a little bit more about what happened in the boarding schools, because I think it's really good for people to really understand that, because when people hear boarding schools, they hear, oh, people go to boarding schools all the time. What's the big deal? But it wasn't your typical boarding school, right?
No, so Dave had mentioned how his father's hands were broke for. So we had to learn the Christian religion. We had to learn the English language, and to identify as an Anishinaabe was shamed, right? It was allowed. So we were given white names, right? European names.
Okay.
Our hair was cut. We were given uniforms to wear, and anything and everything, whether it was cultural or by our skin color or whatever, that identified us as Anishinaabe was not allowed. We were then citizens of the United States and citizens of that church, right? So any individual freedom was not allowed for our people. So I don't understand when they say that they put us in these boarding schools to teach us civility. I'm going to quote one of my favorite people in the world, John Trudell here. Did civility mean something else to these people? Did civility mean rape, torture, murder, and child abuse? Because that's what happened in these boarding schools. And it's starting to come to truth and light now, right? Because the internet has made history more accessible and information. And if you look at all the different lawsuits in the states that are happening, like 300 alone here in Michigan, hey, for the boarding schools. And then there was like another 400 in Pennsylvania. And then all the ones that are happening in our First Nations brothers and sisters up in Canada, right? And it's going to happen over and over. But that, just because a lawsuit happens, that again, that's not reconciliation. Reconciliation is sitting down, having a conversation with those people, right? And accepting responsibility, whether you were alive when that happened or not. Yeah, your ancestors did that. And how are you going to correct it at this point? And I don't care how uncomfortable the conversation makes you, you're going to hear it, because these things, I don't know if they think that us getting our ass whipped was comfortable. So again, it has to be on our terms, right? That's how reconciliation works. And there's a great documentary out that addresses this called Donland. If nobody has seen it, I suggest you go and research and look for it. It might be on YouTube now for free. And they also
What's the
have
name
a
of it
manual. It's called Donland, and it talks
again?
about the people that first greeted the illegal immigrants that washed up on these shores,
Okay.
and what the boarding schools had done to them. We had women that were bleaching their skin
Mm,
so that they didn't look so Native American and looked more white, right?
that's so sad.
Priests from absolutely, it'll tear your heart out, right?
Mm.
These were things that were done to us in the name of their church. Uh, uh, I could go on for days about the trauma that the church has caused, but that's led to things like alcoholism. Um,
Well, yeah, and I want to get to that. I want to talk about the generational trauma, that is right now, on reservations because, people always talk about natives and they say, oh, they're nothing but a bunch of alcoholics. They're nothing but a bunch of dope heads. And, it's so dismissive and so offensive because people don't understand. They don't understand trauma. I now understand that a little bit more that people don't get it. Even when we look at things right now with the outrage that's going on throughout the country right now in regards to people being treated as humans, right? So people are out kind of acting out, so to speak, and people are so upset about it and so disgusted by it because they don't understand trauma. And this is not making excuses for people or advocating for any type of violence or destruction. But when you understand trauma, you understand that after so long, when you have been unseen, unheard, and dismissed and abused and discredited, I could go on and on. You start to act out. That's just, even if your body is sick internally, it will start to show up on the outside. That's just the way things go. That's the natural science of things. So I want to talk about that, how people have that type of mindset in regards to natives not understanding the generational trauma that's going on. So I want you to talk about that.
yeah, so generational trauma, like you said, it's not debatable. It's not arguable. It's scientifically proven. Your people, my people carry it. It's shown up in DNA. One of the old sayings that Russell Means used to say, one of the founders of AIM, was that for us native peoples, that times that we feel anger or that time that we feel we need to act, that's our Indian spirit. Because back in the day, we literally had to defend our women and children and our elders, right? That was literally an everyday occurrence for us. And that got encoded into our DNA. So generational trauma, every Native American, Indigenous, or Indian carries it, whether they live on a reservation, whether they grew up in a rich suburb, whether they grew up in an urban area, or whether they grew up in a suburb. That's just a fact. We carry it. What that does to those on the reservation, though, sometimes this misconception that reservations are like resorts.
Yes, people
yeah.
like it's
There's
like
only one. Yeah, there's only one that I know of in the state of Michigan that's really nice, and that's down in Athens, and that's because it's newer. Mine is still a shithole. I remember when I was a kid, we had blue tarps on the roofs, and they were all tar paper shacks.
Oh man.
That's how they are out west, right? And that's how they are down at the Seven Nations. And so that generational trauma, because when you raise up in these spots, my res I can only speak of because I grew up there, was that we didn't have any positive male role models when I was a youngster. That didn't happen, right? Because there was no hope, there was no jobs. The gaming thing had just happened, right? That gaming law didn't pass until I think like 1989.
Okay.
So all that was new, right? All that money coming in, money to build homes, things like that, different programs. But because of all the things that we had to do in order to survive, alcoholism runs rampant in our people. And I always tell people that I had a healer tell me one time that all people have their own medicines, and
Mm.
alcohol is not our medicine, right? That's why it fucks us up. Our DNA is not meant to work it. It's not meant to absorb it. It's not meant for us. It's not our medicine. That is their medicine, and they've used it for millennia. We have our own medicine. So that's why it hooks us, I think, is part of the reason, but also food. So prior to assimilation and colonization, we lived a very different diet. And believe it or not, we were actually more vegan and vegetarian than we were meat eaters, right? Meat to get us through the winter time. Other
Well,
than that, we ate a lot of berries and nuts.
yeah,
Yeah,
same with us.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when we started changing our diet, that also changed our DNA, right? And so when food preservatives came in, it affected our people in other ways, right? So like ulcerative colitis is a thing in our people now, and Crohn's disease, diabetes, right? And that's because of all these different sugars and all these different things that they put in this food.
Yeah.
Other forms of generational trauma is the lack of education.
Yes.
Here's a fact for everybody right now. The average age for a male Native American to obtain a post-high school education is 38 years old.
Wow.
For a woman, it's 35. So literacy is another, right? Because they want to teach us how to read and write. They just wanted us to sign forms, right? Another thing is broken homes, right? And this is probably many communities across the country that deal with this. But when you took our fathers and our positive role models back in the day, like the Russell Means and the John Trudells and you know, the healers and our pipe carriers, and you locked them up for being Indian, you left a gap for our people, because then we didn't know how to behave. We didn't know what we were supposed to do, right? We took what
it was like you
those
said,
that were supposed to lead us.
it was the leaders. And just like in our communities, we have people right now that are still locked away in prison, solitary confinement, that were leaders in our communities. And because they were leading, they got locked up. And that's a proven fact that people, I mean, some of them still have not ever had a court date. I mean, that's been some decades, right? So I mean, it's the same concept that, you know, and that's why I always find it very interesting when I hear people who are not of color, and they say, you know, well, you guys don't have fathers, or you don't have that, which is also not all the way true, because I've worked with a lot of families that were not of color, that don't have that are single parent homes. So I mean, everybody has that. But my point in saying this is that, you know, I find it interesting when people say that, because it was strategically done that way. Right. I mean, this is a proven fact. I mean, they have transcripts, they have documents to show that there were certain systems put in place to do this. I mean, even when you look at the crack epidemic in our communities, you know, that was done purposely. It was different things that have been tried throughout history, where it's like, we're going to dismantle. And they actually have this documented that it was said, this is how you can break up this community. This is how you can, you know, when you talk about redlining, and when you talk about this, and I mean, it's just so many different things. So this is not mythical. This is not in our head. You know, when people say, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, it's like, do I have boots? You know, you have boots. I don't even have boots. You know, and I'm saying that.
Give me a goddamn pair of boots.
Yes. And this is, you know, and the thing is that, you know, and that's the thing, you know, people say we're all Americans, we all have these same opportunities. That is not true. And I mean, and it's a fact, because like I said, this is documented information that there were certain systems put in place purposely to dismantle and to destroy. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There's federal governments of where they had a plan to have my people exterminated by 1933. So I always tell people, hey, I'm one of them Indians that your ancestors weren't able to kill, right? I'm one of them descendants. Because there is actual proof that they wanted us all dead by 1933 for all the reasons that you just listed, and everything that we've been talking about prior. And that's a fact. And so that's another added layer of generational trauma, knowing that every day that we go and wake up and walk in that duality as Native Americans, because the fact is that we do walk in a duality. We do live in a dual world. I live in my traditional Anishinaabeg world, and I also live in dominant society world, and I have to operate between the two. And sometimes, hey, that's not possible. And sometimes that's when people get rubbed the wrong way, or hey, he's very combative, or he's aggressive. And it's not that. It's that I always tell people there are certain things in this world that are only reserved for my people, and I will never apologize for that. Just like
Oh
there's certain
yeah,
things in this world that are only reserved for your people, right? And we
yeah,
shouldn't apologize for that, because that's the way that things were created. That's what
yeah.
makes us us. And in my culture, we have this whole teaching about the medicine wheel.
I was going to say about
It goes
medicine,
into
like it's
that.
different things, yeah, that's passed down in different communities and different cultures that are sacred to that family line, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has that. So yeah, I really want to talk about too, Joe, the 1978 Religious Freedom Act. I want to talk about that a bit because that's important to talk about. Because 1978 is not that long ago. So I was born in 1979. So that was a year before I was born. So I mean, that's really not because I'm not that old. So it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
that
was
long
born in
ago.
76.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I want to talk about the that Religious Freedom Act, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Jimmy Carter should be every Indian's favorite president. Um, Without him, we wouldn't have got the Indian Religious Act, which allowed us to actually be free people. Prior
Mm.
to that, uh, yeah, they gave us voting rights, right? And they gave us citizenship in 1924, but we weren't able to use those things because in order to get off the reservation, we had to have approval by the BIA agent, the Indian agent, right? And then
Oh,
in order to vote, we had to pay a tax, and you had to make all these other requirements in order to do that, right? So we weren't
really?
really free. Yes.
To be
So
able to vote, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I heard you right. So to be able to vote, you had to pay money first. So that's basically the same thing when they used to
a
do
poll
when
tax.
black people used to try to vote, and they would have these like weird tests, like that stuff that nobody would know. And then once you failed it, you weren't able to. Okay, keep going, carry
And
on.
also in many states, it was law that the more quantum you were, the less competent you were viewed, so you weren't able to vote. So a full blood often wasn't able to vote because they were considered incompetent. But a half blood or a quarter blood, they would allow to vote because they had some white man blood and civility in them.
If
Um,
if
and
if you pay if you pay this money, and if you went through these different loopholes.
correct.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so uh,
Whew.
prior to 1978, we weren't allowed to speak our language in public places. We weren't allowed to have powwows. We weren't allowed to practice our religious or cultural beliefs, whatever term you want to give them. We weren't allowed to
Mm.
wear our artwork in public with fear of being arrested. Um,
Wow.
that law actually gave us freedom, because until then we weren't allowed to be Indian. We had to be whatever dominant society told us that we had to be if we got permission to come off the reservation.
Wow.
So when that law passed, it made it where we could have powwows, we could do our sacred ceremonies, right? Our pipe carriers could come out of hiding out, because prior to that, they were all in hiding. You only got to go to a ceremony if you were invited, because it was so top secret and where they did it. And uh,
Really?
Dennis Banks, the founder of AIM, the founder of AIM, Dennis Banks, speaks about this in his book Ojibwe Warrior, that he went out and did the Sundance because he's Ojibwe, so our lodge is the Meday Lodge. And our Grand Master Chief up there is a guy named Eddie Benton. When Dennis got out of prison, he could not find Eddie because Eddie was in hiding. So he had gone to the Sioux, right in the Lakota, out in the plains, and got with Leonard Brodog. That became his spiritual leader because he couldn't fit Eddie because everything was so top secret. Um,
Wow.
and
I'm sorry. My face is
that
probably-
actually happened.
Oh,
So when people tell me, "Hey, you're not acting like like your elders," or "You're not acting like how how we used to be," what a misconception, because this is new to all of us, no matter our age, right? We weren't free until 78. So even the elders, this is new to them, right? And they're learning just as much as we are on what that is. So to think that our people were weak-minded, or we always compromised, or we turned the other cheek, is a total disrespect and dishonor to my ancestors who were warriors. to make sure that these things stayed in place and that we kept them alive, whether it was in secret or not, that we
Yeah.
kept them alive so that one day when we could utilize them again, we could do that. But that's part of the reason why the language went away too, and that a lot of us are just starting to relearn the language, is because of that act, that Freedom of Religious Act, the boarding school, and the generational trauma, where my grandfather would get mad if we came and spoke the language at his house, because he had a bad history with speaking it in his youth,
Exactly.
right? So that came to the forefront in his elder years, and he would get mad when we'd speak the language. And that happens in many Nishnab communities. And again, I can only speak for me. There's 570 nations. I can't speak for all. I can only speak for my family and my small circle. And I want to be very
Right.
clear about that, because people love to say, well, this one Indian said, and then they think we speak for all of them, right? We don't.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that
Exactly.
Freedom Act allowed us to be free.
Yeah, I think about when, the idea when a child touches, a stovetop and they get hot, right? They get burned, it's hot. And I think about that in regards to what you're saying with your grandfather and, your father. You said your father, I'm sorry.
Grandfather.
Yeah, your grandfather. Okay. So, it's the same idea that if every time I speak my language, I get hit or, some type of form of abuse, then of course that fear, and it becomes like muscle memory. Like you literally connect those two things together. So of course, out of that fear and that conditioning, right, that forced conditioning, then now they pass that on. And that happens all the time. I mean, it's the same thing. And that's the part that's so sad about it, because, I just always think about the arrogance of it all, to believe that my way, my culture is the only right way. And I'm going to force, beat, abuse you, take things away, control you to make you believe it too, and practice the way that I want you to. That is just heartbreaking and just so interesting all at the same time. And since we're talking about kind of like elders and things of that nature, I want to talk about the Navajo Nation, the COVID thing. I know I told you that had a young lady on here that was able to share a lot of information as well, but we had a bad connection that day, so a lot of information was not able to get out that I really wanted her to touch on, because they're having a lot of cases down there and people are not understanding why. So I wanted you to talk about what's happening, kind of, and why that is, where they are getting so plagued with this.
Yeah, so just so anybody that tries to refute or whatever, I want them to know that my degree is in public and nonprofit admin, and my minor was in urban development.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you some historical facts that may trigger some people, and I'm going to say some things that we just may disagree on, and that's just what it is, eh?
And that's okay. So, we're just having a conversation.
Prior to World War II, reservations weren't even considered suburbs or reservations. No money was given into them. We had to be good little Indians to get our rations, which we called commodities, right? Which would be our flour, our rice, our lard, all that stuff, right? After World War II and after the Indians, the Navajo Nation saved this country's ass in that war. Urban development happened. And this is how deep systems of oppression operate in this country. Reservations and other places of color and poverty were purposely and deliberately left off urban development plans. And what that means is that those places were deliberately left off planning for water and sewage, electricity, your basic utility services, right? Telephone, things like that. And the Seven Nations Reservation out in Arizona is one of them. So when the COVID came out and all these hand washing requirements came about, people like me were wondering, how in the fuck do these people wash their hands when they don't have running water? And then if you look at the history of the Navajo Nation, and in 2002, the Navajo Nation signed a resolution that banned all genetic studies of their people because they had allowed it prior, and the research companies and universities violated medical ethic codes and were doing things that they weren't supposed to do with these people's DNA.
Oh my
So you
goodness.
add that in with the generational trauma and all the lies that the history had told and the government had told to these people, and you tell them a pandemic. There's no word in their language for a pandemic. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't even understand what it was, right?
Mm,
So then you want them to believe that what the US government is saying is true, right? And these are people that live way more traditionally than I do. What did they think was going to happen? And that's why the COVID numbers are so rampant in the Navajo Nation right now, is because of those reasons. There's the lack of utilities and running water, clean running water. I mean, there's people that live on lands that have never had clean running water out in that area, right? But Phoenix
mm-hmm.
and them, right in the middle of a goddamn desert, have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, and you can look. Here's another thing that people, every social environmental injustice in this country and in Canada happened to Native Americans until Flint. Flint is the only other one that did not involve Native Americans, right? And then here in Rockford, same thing happened, right? Took 2 fucking years for people to listen about Flint. Rockford happens 2 fucking days. The state's there, and they're doing all these goddamn tests, and all these people are getting heard, and water's being shipped, and they're ready to fix the goddamn water structure. But we're still waiting in Flint, right? We're still waiting in Standing Rock. We're still waiting in the Navajo Nation. We're still waiting up in California, right? And we're still waiting in Utah and all these other areas that are isolated that our people reside in, that were forced to by agreements and treaties and the governments, and we were
That
left
we're
off these plans,
under.
and they wonder why these things happened.
Yeah. 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 No, no, I totally get it. And that's the thing, is that it's always this surprised way of being that people have when they see the results, of this cause and effect, the results of what happened to people. And then they say, well, why are you so upset? Or shouldn't you just be happy? Because do you not see what's happening right now currently? I mean, this stuff is happening right now currently. And like when you mentioned Standing Rock, I just remember watching videos of that, and people being sprayed, and just trying to demand to be treated as a human being, and they're being tear gassed and sprayed and just called all kind of names. And I saw older people, the elders, being abused.
Mm-hmm.
I just said, what is wrong? What is happening right now? How are you able to sleep at night doing that to someone, just on the mere fact that they are, up in age? How could you do that? It's just
Because they don't view us as people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
They're
that's
still mad that we're still here.
it's a learned behavior, just like, you learn different things from your grandfather. These are learned behaviors and learned ideologies, learned mindsets that are passed down, and it's just heartbreaking. It's so where do we go from here? What do you, as an Indigenous person, a Native American, where do we go? How do we fix any of this? I'm always a person of, I like to have some kind of solution or some type of direction to go in. Where do we go from here? How do we solve some of these problems? Uh-oh, Joe, did I lose
Uh,
you? There he goes.
so reconciliation has to be one of the first steps. And,
Okay.
well, are you there?
Yes, I'm
All right.
here.
Are we good? Okay.
Yes.
Uh, so this is a part where I may upset some people. And again, I'm not here to please people, make friends. I'm here to tell the truth and tell how I see things. And I also
Sure.
understand how systems work and how we need to address them. And number one is
Okay.
that we need to understand in the early 60s, late 70s, that we Indigenous people, Indians and Native Americans, we did shit. Hey, we took over the BIA. We took Alcatraz. Hey, we didn't get BIA laws to change because we held up a damn sign that said Native Lives Matter. And they said, hey, come in and have a conversation. No, that didn't fucking happen like that, right? We used to do shit. Hey, Standing Rock. Prior to Standing Rock, After the 1972 taking of the BIA, we had a damn thing, right? Nothing. Standing Rock was the biggest gathering of Native nations in history, right? And even then, we wishy-washy on how we should react, and that our people didn't fight and sacrifice for the things that we have, right? And that's bullshit, and that's a dishonor to me and my ancestors and my clan, because we are fighters. We didn't survive 550 years of colonization and assimilation because we were weak-minded or weak people. So the number one thing we need to do is get rid of fear, because when you live in fear, you're never going to address social justice issues. You're never going to get to address environmental injustice, and you're never going to get to talk about identity, because that fear is going to wrap your mind and prevent you from doing those things. So I'm going to tell everybody what I learned a long time ago from an elder. Okay? We Indians, we ain't scared of bullets no more. We're past that. Okay? We are way past that. So get out of fear. Start making a stand, number one, right? Number two, get to know your history. Understand that we fought for these things. We weren't given them. Eh? And this notion that we're always this peaceful people, and that we always pander, right? We didn't. And it's important to understand that, because AIM used to be about that. And there are certain organizations like the Red Nation and things like that that understand that now, and that I always tell people, I don't ask for the same space that my non-native people occupy every day. I fucking take it, because there's government constitutional forms that say I'm entitled to that fucking space. I'm not asking for it, I'm taking it. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's a you problem. That's not a Joe problem. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this notion that we have to ask to occupy these spaces, we need to destroy that as well. That needs to be gone. Okay? You should be loud and proud that you are a Native American, Indigenous, or Anishinaabeg, or Indian. You survived. You are a descendant of one of the Indians that they couldn't kill. Okay? Do something with that. Okay? This notion that holding signs is going to do something. No, I'm going to quote Grandmaster Jay here from last week. A fucking barrel of a gun does. Hey, it's time. Hey, I'm the one out there facing racial slurs all the time. You think I want my nieces and my nephews and my children to have to face those things? Hell no. So you know what? We used guns to take over the BIA. We used guns to take over Alcatraz. We used guns that wounded knee. It's time that we start utilizing our Second Amendment right and demanding and occupying the same spaces that they're trying to force us out of, and demand that we are heard. This notion of having a pipe ceremony or a blanket ceremony in order to get a spot at the table is over. There are plenty of us that have an education. There are plenty of us that are fill different roles, whether it's in movie making or writing books, or telling history. Those guarantee us spots at the table, and we need to start demanding those tables. We need to demand that spot. We need to take that spot. The asking is over, and that's the only way we're going to address. And this notion of quantum, okay, that's just another perpetuation of colonization. If my fucking Indian card doesn't make me more Indian than anybody else, that is a false narrative. And we need to get rid of that, because all those treaties say every Indian. And if we demonize and get rid of the word Indian, and we make it where non-native people can't use that term, well, guess what? No fucking Indians means no treaties. So they would never honor the treaties, because you all got rid of all the Indians. So that's a term that we use in our cards, and we need to start embracing it. And this is our time, with all the momentum that's happening in social justice. This is our time to take that space, create an allyship, and demand that we are being heard. That's going to look like many different things.
I have a question for you real quick. Sorry to interrupt. So I just want to understand this a little bit more. I know we have to go here in a little bit, but I want to understand a little bit more about the card. So say for instance, I can't get a card, right? Because I can't prove whatever, right? My lineage or my bloodline. What happens to me? Like how am I cared for? What do I do? I'm trying to understand that. Am I asking it right?
No, you're right on, and this is one of the things I try to fight in this community, because with all that gaming money, tribes have ended some enrollment, right? Because they don't want to extend that pie any more than they have to, right? That's where that colonization and that white man greed came in. But there are people like that came from the boarding schools, and I know people here in Grand Rapids, hey, that's Danae, and she can't prove because there's no papers for her to go back on. So what, do they not count? They don't get representation. They don't get to partake in ceremonies and pipe ceremonies. That's bullshit. Our old saying in our culture, one drop counts. That's been handed down from me from the time I was a little youngster to now, and I'm 43 years old. I totally believe that. The Indian card, like I said, it's just another form of colonization, and now they're using it to limit enroll. That's not going to help in our identity issue, because here's a real fact. There are more Indians that live off the res in urban areas than those that live on the reservation. So until we embrace that and understand that, and we get rid of this notion that an Indian card is the ultimate authority of determining my nativeness, we're never going to address that issue. All that native card is a fucking tracker. They know where I work, they know where I live, they know when I'm dead. Because that's one less treaty they have to honor.
But what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, are people within like the native family kind of not accepting the person as well if they don't have that card? They're not allowed to participate?
Absolutely.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, lateral oppression.
Yeah.
Nobody does lateral oppression like us Indians, and I always tell people that, hey, we mastered that shit. And what happened here in Grand Rapids, for instance, is that for decades you had families that mingled and did things together, and then these tribes came in with their money and they started buying properties in Grand Rapids, right? And then having events that were only limited to their members. So then you had these families that were working together for 20 years, and one's like, hey, we're gonna go to this event over here, but you have to be a member. And their friend's like, well, I can't go, I don't have a card, right? So you created a barrier, an invisible barrier between families and the community, and it's all because of this money. And it's because they've closed enrollment. And again, it comes to tribal sovereignty. I get that, and I respect.
The last part
Did
you
you
said,
get all
Joe,
that, or did I freeze?
you kind of broke up a little bit when you were saying that the invisible line, because that really kind of blows my mind a little bit, because this is something that was created by a whole different system outside of the native family, but the native family uses it against each other. And this is just not native people. I mean, a lot of cultures do this, where we kind of have this colorism, and we have different levels to things. So I get that. So I'm not trying to like pick on natives. I'm just talking about this particular conversation, but that's very interesting that something outside of you created a barrier and a divisiveness, a divisive tool, and then now we take it in and say, okay, now we're going to use it against each other. That's very interesting to me. Divide and conquer, right?
Yeah, and so like dominant society will often question, well, hey, do they have an Indian card if they're speaking about Indians? Like, who the fuck are you to ask me that anyway? That's
Right.
just another form too, right? But also the other part is that in 1673 there was a treaty, 1873, I'm sorry, a treaty here called the Jay Treaty, and it took Drummond Island and Sugar Island, which were once Canadian territories, and it transferred them to American. And what it did, and my family is one of the many families that got split by this imaginary border of Canada and the US, right? So my family got an Indian card, but my family on the other side of that river doesn't have one. And they don't get to come and do events and partake in services, right? But they're the same quantum and the same family tree as me, but they're not honored because of this stupid concept of an Indian card
that somebody else made up. That's the part that just blows my mind. It's not even.
Yep.
Oh wow. Okay. So okay, so where do we go, Joe? How do we, like you said, just starting to stand up, and I know, a lot of people are kind of on that same momentum when it comes to not just protesting anymore, and I know a lot of people have that same mindset where it's like, we We tried that. We've done that. Even I know some people have made mention, even with Kaepernick, it's like, I know I see a lot of stuff going around where it says, you told us to stand up. You didn't want us kneeling down. So now people are up and you still have a problem with that. So I do agree with you in regards to, it is time for people to be heard, to make sure they are seen. And I am a firm believer that I will not beg to sit at your table. I will not do that. I will create my own table and invite whoever I like to come and who wants to join with me to my table. And I think that I do agree with in regards to that it is time for people to stop begging for or asking, am I allowed to do this? Yeah, and just
for scraps.
Yeah, and am I allowed to be seen? Am I allowed to matter? Am I allowed to this? It's like you just do. You need to just be. And that's where I do agree with that. And that's where I'm at in regards to that. So I agree with you on that part of it, that it is time for people to walk in their truth and to simply be. And that people don't have to ask permission to exist. That time is over. So, Joe, I appreciate you so much for taking time today to come on. It's so much to learn and unpack from this because so many questions, because it's a lot of stuff that I try to do my own research and read up and talk to people, but I really do like to have actual conversations with people because people share so much, different history, like you said, that is passed down that they learn. So I appreciate you for sharing.
Well, and thank you. Hey, I just want to give a shout out to my niece, Jade. I promised her that I'd give her a shout out because she's watching.
What's her name?
Jade.
Oh, hey, Jade.
Gigi Goons Quay is her Indian name.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad that Uncle was able to give you a shout out. That's awesome. I like I said, I appreciate you for taking the time and sharing this. And like you said, people oftentimes that are passionate are sometimes misunderstood, and that's okay, because we are, just we have some strong convictions and things that we believe in and are willing to fight for, to be able to, like I said, be seen and be heard. So I see nothing wrong with that. And I know we all do it in different ways. But I appreciate this type of space where people can be their authentic self with no condemnation, no judgment. It's like, hey, this is who I am, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much for taking the time this evening to share your story. And I wish you a great evening. And I know you're running for office, right? Plug your. I know you're running, so I wanted to make sure we mention that.
Yeah, thanks. So I want to thank you for providing a space for all the different voices that you do have, and for your tolerance, and your competency. Really means a lot to people like me that have become a fan and support your endeavors. So I thank you very much for that as well. And I'm running for Alpine Township Supervisor. It's a hardcore red area. We'll see how it goes. But I just wanted to show people that sometimes, like Gandhi said, you have to be the change that you want to see. And so I thought this was a good way to display that. So I thank you for that plug.
Awesome. So did you say what you're actually running for? Did they vote on that today?
Today was our primary. I'm running for Township Supervisor for Alpine Township in Grand Rapids.
Okay, and what is that? Because I don't follow a lot of politics. So what does that position do?
Basically, just manage the township on a daily basis. It's a 4-year term. But I feel that this township doesn't necessarily hear all the people of color. They're often forgotten because of the farm, and this area is big for the fruit. So a lot of those people get a lot more voices and voice power than those that are on the other spectrum. And I'm just trying to be a voice for those people and to make sure that they have a spot at the table and that they're not forgotten.
So to be a little bit more inclusive.
Exactly. Yep. That's my goal. Make it more welcoming too, right? Government should be more welcoming.
Yes, and yes, and I won't even get into all of that. That's a whole
That's a whole other conversation.
yes. But thank you so much again. I appreciate you for taking the time. I love this conversation. I love learning more about Native history. You know, because I also am a believer that there were Black natives, and we were all some of us were all here together. I do believe that.
Yep.
So I love, talking about this because it's really heartbreaking. I feel like when I look back at this later, my face will probably be like this most of the time because hearing about the forcing of accepting somebody else's culture is just mind-boggling to me. And I know, of course, it has happened, and it still happens today. But it's just still, when you hear the stories, like with the gentleman who talks about, his father's hand being broken because he wouldn't speak English, to beat somebody, their culture and who they are out of them is just despicable. And it's just, so I feel like my face probably was like this whole time. I wasn't angry. I just was like, oh, well, I probably was a little angry too, but but a little bit just in shock. So, but anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I wish you a great evening. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, which in my language, we don't have a word for goodbye. We say Bamapi. It means I'll see you later. I'll see you on the trail again. And I know that we'll see each other. And you ever want to explore that conversation? I got some books that might help you out. Just hit me up.
Sure. Yeah, I would love to share that too. So thank you so much, Joe. And again, yes, and see you later. I like that. That's what we like to say, not bye, but see you later. So thank you so much. Take care. Peace.
Bamapi. Be good. Bye.
Awesome. Well, we had a great conversation with Joe tonight. I'm so excited that he was able to come on and share his story. I appreciate everyone who watched tonight. This was just a reminder that we have to allow people to be their authentic selves. We don't have to force people to agree with us, to be like us, to accept us. Everybody can be themselves and still come to the same table. We have to get past this idea that we all have to walk the same, talk the same, and think the same. So sharing these type of stories helps kind of, just kind of drive that point home that we're allowed to be a little different. So anyway, you guys have a great evening. I appreciate you all. And like you said, see you guys later. Take care. Bye.